We were so excited when we finally found our dream home. My wife, our 2 kids, and I had been living in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment for years, trying to save up enough money to buy a house. The housing market was insane, but somehow we managed to get an accepted offer on this gorgeous 4-bedroom house in a nice suburban neighborhood. The move-in process was chaotic, but thrilling. The kids couldn't believe they finally had their own rooms and space to play. My wife and I were thrilled to have an office, a walk-in closet, and the big open kitchen she had always wanted. After a long day of unpacking boxes, we all slept soundly that first night. Exhausted, but so happy to finally be settling into our new home. Everything was great at first. The kids made friends with the neighborhood kids. I didn't mind my longer commute to work because I loved coming home to my family each night. Life just seemed happier and easier in our spacious new house. But then the nightmares started. It began with our son, who was 8 at the time. He started having intense dreams every night about a dark figure standing in his closet, just watching him while he slept. Sometimes in the dreams, the figure would move towards his bed menacingly. Our son would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, terrified to go back to sleep. My wife and I tried to calm him down, assuring him it was just a nightmare brought on by the big changes in our life, like moving. But every night for weeks, he had the same nightmare. He refused to sleep in his room and would end up in our bed by morning. We even let him switch rooms with his sister, but the dark figure appeared again as soon as he started sleeping in there. Soon our daughter began having creepy dreams too. She dreamed that someone was underneath her bed grabbing at her ankles when she got up to use the bathroom at night. She said the hands felt real, like cold, rough skin scraping against her legs as she tried to walk. Like her brother, she started ending up in our room at night, crying about the nightmare person under her bed that was trying to drag her under. My wife and I didn't know what to do. We felt awful for our kids who were terrified to sleep in their own rooms now. I considered getting a dog or some cameras to help provide comfort and security. We even talked to a child psychologist for advice. But nothing helped. The nightmares continued every night for both kids. Just as I was starting to wonder if something was seriously wrong in our new house, I began having unsettling dreams too. I dreamed that I kept hearing a child crying behind the wall next to my side of the bed. But no matter how I searched the house, tore at the drywall, or shouted for the child, I could never find the source. I would jolt awake at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat, still hearing faint crying coming from within the walls. I didn't want to scare my wife, so I kept the dreams to myself at first. Then one morning she said she needed to talk to me about something strange happening at night. Turns out she was having eerie dreams about our hallway. In her dreams, all the framed photos on the walls showed dead bodies buried in graves instead of our family's smiling faces. She would walk down the hall, staring in horror at the gruesome burial photos, the hallway seeming to elongate before her eyes. At the end of the hall stood a pale, ghostly figure staring right at her. She had woken up screaming several nights in a row, but was afraid to tell me until now. We decided then and there to get out of the house until we could figure out what to do. Maybe carbon monoxide was causing us all to have bad dreams. We booked a hotel and packed up the kids and dog to leave that night. But as we walked out the front door, I felt an invisible force suddenly push me back into the house. The door slammed shut behind us, locked somehow. My kids started screaming and crying, terrified we were trapped. Frantically, I unlocked the front door and we ran out to the safety of our car, speeding away from that house of endless nightmares. We're staying with family now while trying to decide what to do next. My kids refuse to return to the house, but my wife and I can't afford to break the mortgage contract. I keep having this bad feeling that whatever is haunting that house will follow us if we ever go back. But for now, I'm just grateful to be waking up nightmare-free, with my family safe by my side. I'm not sure what lurks within those walls, but I know one thing. That house has some very dark energy lingering inside, and I fear the evil residing within may be more dangerous than our nightmares ever could be. My 7-year-old daughter Emma has always had an active imagination. She spends hours playing make-believe with her dolls and stuffed animals, assigning elaborate personalities and life stories to each. I never thought much of it until that chilling night in our backyard. It was a mild summer evening after dinner. My husband was working late, so I was reading in the living room while Emma played upstairs. At some point, I realized I hadn't heard her chatter or footsteps for a while. I called out, but got no response. Heading upstairs, I saw Emma's bedroom empty, windows open to the backyard. I felt a twinge of motherly worry seeing she wasn't inside. Stepping out onto the deck, I scanned the dusk-shadowed yard. That's when I spotted Emma crouched under the big oak tree, her dress coated in dirt. She seemed to be digging into the ground with a trowel from her play tool bench. "Emma, honey, what are you doing out here?" I called. She glanced up with an eerie blank look. "Burying my dolls like Mr. Phantom said to." Beside her lay a large soup pot containing her favorite dolls, their inert plastic faces peering out. I walked over, concerned and confused. Kneeling down, I saw she had dug numerous small holes in the dirt, just big enough to fit a doll. Emma kept digging monotonously, not meeting my eyes. "Sweetie, why would you bury your nice dolls? And who is Mr. Phantom?" She halted her digging and pointed one dirty finger toward the darkening woods. "He lives in there. He told me it's time to put my dolls in the ground tonight. Tomorrow, I have to bury Fluffy. Then you." I reeled back at her words, utterly horrified. Before I could respond, Emma's vacant expression shifted to her normal, cheerful one. "But don't worry. I won't let him hurt you. I'll protect you, Mommy," she said brightly before resuming her digging. I hastily carried a protesting Emma inside, washing the dirt off her before tucking her into bed. I convinced myself this must be some kind of twisted imaginary game. But I couldn't shake the morbid pit it left in my stomach. The next evening after dinner, Emma asked to go outside again to check on the dolls she had buried. Wanting answers, I told her I would join her this time. As we walked to the tree, I noticed the dug-up earth from the previous night was smoothed over now. Emma sank to her knees and began clawing at the dirt to unearth the holes containing her dolls. My dread grew as she carefully lifted each lifeless plaything out of their miniature graves, brushing them off tenderly. "Just checking if they are okay down there," she explained. "A few more nights buried and then they can come out again." Before I could muster a response, she turned to me with that same vacant look. "But tonight Fluffy has to take their place. Mr. Phantom says it's her turn now." Fluffy was the sweet elderly dog we had rescued a couple of years ago. The thought of burying her made me nearly faint. I tried to explain gently that we could never hurt Fluffy since she was part of our family. Emma contemplated this and finally nodded. "You're right, Mommy. I won't bury her then since she's family, but Mr. Phantom said you're next. He told me I have to put you in the ground." She tilted her head curiously. "Maybe you could pretend to be buried, though, so he won't get mad?" By now, I was genuinely terrified at whatever darkness had infected my little girl's mind. I had to figure out who or what Mr. Phantom represented and pull my daughter back from this disturbing influence. I hastily ushered her inside for the night, ignoring her protests that she wasn't done checking on her buried playmates. Lying awake that night, I listened for any hint of Emma trying to sneak outside again. Everything remained still and quiet. In the morning light, it all seemed like a bad dream. I decided not to mention the previous nights anymore, hoping the morbid fixation would pass. But deep down, I harbored a creeping dread that this was something more sinister at work in Emma's mind. Over the next week, life seemed to return to normal. Emma happily played with Fluffy and her resurrected dolls with no mention of graves or Mr. Phantom. I let my guard down, relieved it was over. Then late one afternoon, I couldn't find Emma anywhere. I checked every room, called her name, and then rushed outside, hoping not to find her digging in her burial ground. But the yard was empty. Fighting panic, I noticed the gate to the path through the woods ajar. Emma knew never to go back there alone, but every instinct told me she had wandered down that shadowy trail. I grabbed a flashlight and hurried into the woods, yelling her name as dusk dimmed the trees around me. The path twisted deeper into the forest, swallowed by darkness. Finally, my light caught something ahead. The beam illuminated Emma's pink dress, poking out from a tangled bush just off the trail. I ran to her limp form, my scream echoing through the woods. She lay crumpled and motionless. I cradled her, begging her to wake up as tears streamed down my face. Finally, her eyes fluttered open. I nearly collapsed in relief as she peered up at me groggily. "Mommy, you found me," she whispered. "But Mr. Phantom? He said you didn't want to play the burial game anymore. He wanted to bury you for real this time." She started to cry. I tried to stop him so he got mad. He hit me. But I won't let him hurt you, Mommy, I promise. Cradling my shaking daughter, I hurried us out of those dark woods, her words chilling me to the bone. Once home, I tucked her under the covers, reassuring her that Mr. Phantom could never bother us again. But when I lay down to sleep, I knew deep down our nightmare wasn't over. Something malevolent lurked in the shadows, trying to turn my innocent girl into a weapon against me. And it would not rest until it finished the twisted game it had begun. We moved out of that house just weeks later. Emma's nightmares and morbid fixation vanished instantly. She bounced back to her joyful self, Mr. Phantom becoming a distant memory. But sometimes I still catch her staring off with that haunted look, as if listening to words only she can hear. And I can't help wondering fearfully if evil has truly finished with my daughter. For now, we can only keep running and pray it doesn't someday find us again. When I started college in 2007, I was eager to get the full college experience I saw in movies. I wanted to join clubs, make lots of friends, and have some adventures. That's how I ended up deciding to pledge a sorority my freshman year. The rush process was a bit intimidating, but everyone was super friendly and welcoming. When I got a bid from Sigma Kappa, I was thrilled. Move-in day arrived, and I lugged my things upstairs to the bedroom I'd share with another new pledge named Becca. The Sigma Kappa house was a stately brick mansion right on campus. Inside were 3 floors of bedrooms, along with a big kitchen, dining room, and living areas where sisters could hang out together. It looked like a perfect home away from home. Becca and I bonded right away. We were both small-town girls feeling overwhelmed by college life. We'd stay up talking and giggling in our bunk beds, promising we'd get each other through rush together. The older sisters seemed impressed by our solid friendship. As initiation approached, the pledges were all buzzing with excitement. We felt so honored to be joining the Sigma Kappa sisterhood. I had never dreamed of having so many built-in friends on campus. It was everything I had hoped for when coming to school. The night before the initiation brought our first weird experience at the house. Becca and I were woken at 3 a.m. by someone loudly crying. Half asleep, we wandered into the hallway to find several sisters crowded silently around the stairs. When I asked what was wrong, the girls exchanged uneasy glances. One finally said we must have been hearing things. They shuffled us back to bed, but I couldn't shake the image of their tense, frightened faces. The next evening was the initiation. We pledges got dressed up in nice dresses and heels. I could hardly zip up my dress because my hands were shaking so much. Before the ceremony, Becca and I poured each other shots from her bottle of vodka to take the edge off. We were all led down to the basement. Lit candles lined the cold cement walls and incense burned. Everything felt ceremonial and ancient. The sisters had us stand before them and recite oaths of loyalty to Sigma Kappa before signing our names in a leather book. As we all filed back upstairs, giddy and swaying a bit from the alcohol, I heard a strange choking sound from the darkened basement behind us. I glanced back, but the staircase was empty. A senior girl noticed my hesitation and smiled, gently pushing me toward the celebration. Upstairs, deafening pop music blared as we danced and laughed in our new sisterhood bond. Everyone congratulated Becca and me, saying they could tell we were true Sigma girls. I felt dizzy with excitement and vodka. This was the best night of my life. Later, I stumbled up to bed with the world spinning happily around me. Becca had passed out downstairs somewhere, so I collapsed into my bunk alone. As I slipped toward unconsciousness, the last thing I heard was soft crying coming from somewhere in the room. The next morning, I woke up confused and head pounding. Becca's bunk below me was empty and untouched. I figured she'd crashed with some other sisters. When I got dressed and went downstairs, I found a solemn mood hanging over the house. 2 senior girls took me aside and broke the news. Becca had died overnight. She'd accidentally fallen down the attic stairs after too much drinking at the initiation party. Police had come to take her body away just an hour before. Nothing felt real. I started sobbing and couldn't stop. The sisters consoled me and told me I could take some time before resuming pledge duties, but classes and life went on around me in a blur. The house felt darker and heavier without Becca's constant laughter. I missed her terribly. A few nights later, I was alone studying in my room. Around 2 a.m., I thought I heard a scuffling sound out in the hall. Figuring someone was headed to the bathroom, I cracked open the door to peek. A girl stood at the end of the hall with her back to me. Assuming it was a senior girl, I called out to her. She didn't answer. As I watched, she slowly turned her head until I could see her face in profile. She didn't look familiar. Confused, I stepped into the hall to get a better look. The girl began drifting backward towards the attic stairs. I followed, trying to place who she was. Reaching the stairs, she paused and looked directly at me. Moonlight illuminated her face. I recoiled in shock. It was Becca, gazing at me sadly. Before I could say a word, she turned and silently climbed the attic stairs. I stood frozen, listening to her footsteps ascending to the attic. Then total silence. I was afraid to follow her up there. I fled back to my room, trembling uncontrollably. Had I imagined Becca to cope with losing her? Or had she really returned to the place where she died? I didn't tell the sisters what I saw. The next day I packed my things and withdrew from pledging in college. I knew I had to get far away from that house where my best friend's ghost was still wandering. I've never been able to explain that night. All I know is Becca wanted me to see her one last time before leaving that house forever. Wherever her spirit is now, I hope she's found peace, but part of her will always haunt those attic stairs, calling out to be remembered.